They laughed at her scars, whispered behind her back, called her names no one should hear. But what they didn't know was that every scar she carried had already survived a war, and the one lesson she'd never forget was how to fight back with dignity. The first time Mrs. Eleanor Hayes walked into Westmore High, the hallway froze. Not because she was late, not because she was loud, but because her presence was different. Her right hand carried a leather binder. Her left sleeve hung empty. Burn scars ran from her temple to her jaw, like branches of a tree, a permanent reminder of the explosion that almost took her life in Afghanistan. She wasn't just a teacher. She was a veteran, a survivor, and now the newest English instructor in a school where teenagers had never seen real war, just video games. But kids can be cruel, and within days, whispers turned to mockery. Pirate teacher, burned out soldier. She should be in a hospital, not a classroom. They laughed at her scars, and one lunchtime, a video surfaced. A group of students had filmed her reading aloud from To Kill a Mockingbird. They zoomed in on her face, added cartoon fire, uploaded it with the caption, "Welcome to Horror Lit 101." It spread like wildfire. The school did nothing, and Mrs. Hayes, she didn't shed a tear. She didn't raise her voice. She just marked her lesson plans and waited. Because some battles aren't won with shouting. They're won with silence and preparation. A week later, the auditorium filled. It was Veterans Appreciation Day. The students expected a flag, a moment of silence, maybe a few awkward claps. But then, Mrs. Hayes walked onto the stage. She wasn't in a blazer. She was in full dress uniform, silver medals, bronze stars, a combat patch from Kandahar, and beside her, a slideshow. But not just any slideshow. It was the footage from the video, unedited, raw, and painful. She played it once, no commentary, no blame. Then she spoke. "You laughed at my scars, but every scar I carry, I earned defending the freedom you take for granted. You filmed my pain, but I volunteered to stand between this country and chaos, while you hid behind usernames." And then she did something no one expected. She pulled out a photo of her platoon, 12 soldiers, only 7 returned home. She paused and said, "You mocked the story on my skin, but some stories are written in blood, and they deserve respect." The room was silent. Some students cried, some stood, all listened. Because in that moment, they realized they hadn't bullied a broken woman. They had tried to humiliate a hero and failed. The next day, the principal announced a new award, the Hayes Honor of Courage, given to one student each year who demonstrates leadership, humility, and moral strength. And the video? It was taken down, replaced with a new one, a standing ovation. And that's why they call it Best Overall Hero Moment. A veteran teacher silenced the bullies who mocked her scars. Because the scars they laughed at, they became the symbols that silenced them all. Miss Helen Warner walked into room 112 like she did every morning, shoulders square, steps slow but steady, and eyes that had seen the worst of humanity, and still chose to teach compassion. But this day was different. Whispers had started the week before. A transfer student, Jeremy, tall, loud, and with a history of testing boundaries, the kind of teenager who smelled fear and mistook kindness for weakness. Helen had handled dozens like him before, but Jeremy wasn't just disrespectful. He was cruel. The day he noticed her scars, the ones crawling up her neck like twisted reminders of a life most would never survive, he smirked. "Hey, Miss Wa, did someone forget to turn the oven off?" The class fell silent. Not out of respect, but tension. The kind of silence that usually ends in yelling or tears. But not with Helen. She didn't flinch. She didn't shrink. She simply walked to the whiteboard, picked up a marker, and wrote 3 words. Lesson in truth. And then, without warning, she told them about the IED in Afghanistan, about the fire, about waking up in a hospital with no one she knew, just mirrors she couldn't look into, and a voice that whispered, "You'll never teach again." But she did. And now she was standing, scarred, yes, but stronger than any insult a child could throw. "You see these burns?" she said, her voice unwavering. "They tried to end me. Instead, they lit something no fire could kill." The class didn't move. Jeremy didn't laugh. He didn't even blink. Because something shifted. This wasn't just a teacher standing in front of a class. This was a soldier, a survivor, a woman who turned trauma into curriculum. By the end of the day, no one remembered Jeremy's joke. They remembered Helen's strength. They remembered how she turned her scars into shields, not for herself, but for every kid in that room who ever felt broken or different. And for the first time, the headlines started to spread. Best overall hero moment, a veteran teacher silenced the bullies who mocked her scars. Helen didn't seek applause. She just adjusted her sleeves, erased the board, and asked the class to turn to page 42. But that day, she didn't just teach literature. She taught legacy. The next morning, something was different. The school hallways felt heavier, not with fear, but reflection. Students walked slower. Teachers spoke softer. And for the first time in years, no one whispered when Helen Warner walked past. Because scars, once laughed at, had become lessons burned into memory. Inside room 2B, the bell rang. But instead of jumping into equations or essays, Helen placed a folded newspaper on every desk. Front page headline, "A veteran teacher shares her battle scars, teaches a whole school what courage looks like." There were no gold medals in her story, no ceremonies, just one night in a desert bunker, a bomb, and the decision to save 5 wounded men, even if it cost her everything. Now, that same woman stood quietly in front of a group of teenagers, and the world was listening. Across the school, the ripples spread fast. One student anonymously left a card on her desk. "I used to be ashamed of my birthmark. You helped me see it differently." Another stood up during English and recited a poem. "Her scars are stars, guiding others home." Jeremy? He hadn't said a word since that day, but people noticed something had changed. He started sitting near the front. He returned a late library book with an apology note. He even picked up trash in the hallway, silently. It wasn't redemption yet, but it was the beginning of something Helen understood better than most: growth through discomfort. Then something unexpected happened. The school board requested a public assembly, not to punish, not to investigate, but to honor. They asked Miss Warner to speak. Again, this time it wasn't just her class in the audience. It was the entire school, parents, staff, media. And as Helen stepped onto that stage, something remarkable happened. The students stood, one by one, a standing ovation before she even said a word. No applause had ever felt more honest. She took a deep breath, then said, "Every scar tells a story. Mine just happens to be louder than most. But if my pain can make you pause before you judge someone else, then it's not just a wound, it's a weapon against cruelty and a tool for change." There was no need for fancy metaphors. She didn't cry.
She didn't ask for sympathy. She gave truth, and truth gave her the room. When the speech ended, something strange happened. Kids who had never spoken to her before hugged her. Teachers cried in the corners. Even the janitor whispered, "My daughter was burned last year. You just gave her hope." And behind it all, the message that wouldn't stop echoing. Best overall hero moment. A veteran teacher silenced the bullies who mocked her scars. Because now the whole school carried her story, not in silence, but in solidarity.
Years passed. Students graduated. New faces arrived, and buildings were remodeled. But in room 2B, something remained untouched. Her spirit. Mrs. Eleanor Hale had officially retired, but the impact of her courage never clocked out. In the staff lounge, they called it the Hale effect. Every year on her birthday, students hung notes outside her old classroom door. "You helped me wear my burn mark with pride. You taught me to raise my hand and my voice. You didn't teach us math. You taught us how to be human." Then came the award, not for academics, but for empathy. The school unveiled a bronze plaque outside the main hallway, the Eleanor Hale Corridor, in honor of scars that became shields. Parents cried, students cheered, reporters tried to call her. She didn't answer. Not because she didn't care, but because she was busy mentoring other teachers in trauma-informed classrooms across the state. One day, a girl named Layla, born with a large birthmark on her face, stood outside room 2B, now renamed the Hale Room. Her mother whispered, this was her classroom, the one who made it okay to look different. Layla smiled, pressed her palm against the door, and said, "Then this is where I'll start." That's legacy. Not in loud applause, but in quiet permission. Mrs. Hale once told a student, "Don't hide your scars. Wear them. Speak through them." Now those words are etched into a mural across the school wall. Her scars never disappeared. They just grew roots in the hearts of everyone who heard her speak. Because this story was never about tragedy. It was about triumph that refused to whisper. Final line for voiceover, repeating core theme. Best overall hero moment. A veteran teacher silenced the bullies who mocked her scars. And in doing so, she didn't just change the classroom. She changed what we call beautiful.